All right. It's at the top of the hour, so we're going to get started. So welcome, everyone. I'm Eric Sweden with NASCIO. Just some preliminary things. The audience is muted, and we ask that you use the chat box for questions. And we'll see sometimes what happens with our chats is it turns into a whole ecosystem where people are answering each other's questions, and that's all good. That's all going to be recorded for future as well. The webinar is recorded, and the recording will be available soon after this webinar. Next slide, please. So we are so glad we have Herb Thompson is our moderator, and he is from actually, originally, he was the Chief Technology Officer, Deputy CIO for the state of Wisconsin. Now he is with VMware. We have Ed Toner, State CIO from Nebraska. We've got John Quinn, State CIO from Vermont. And we're so glad that you all are here. So let's go to the next slide, please. And at this point, I'm going to turn it over to our moderator, Mr. Herb Thompson. Herb, thank you so much for leading us through this.
Thanks, Eric. It's great to be here. And more importantly, VMware is really honored to have partnered with NASCIO on this State of the State about modern application management on this application modernization survey. Application modernization is certainly not new. It's been around for decades as we rebuilt systems over and over. But so why is it top of mind right now for so many people? So many CIOs at state and local levels and universities. I think because COVID really surfaced the flaws in old legacy systems' ability to scale and meet citizens' demand, as well as old manual service delivery models just didn't work to get public assistance into the hands of the citizens when they need it. So we saw across the board our program business areas coming to IT going, we got to figure out new ways of doing business. But additionally, we saw Fed funds coming in at unprecedented levels, right? So now we're at this nexus between citizens demanding digital services, digital personalized integrated services, and the Fed money coming in, the funding model. So we're at this nexus to create an opportunity for application modernization. So today we're going to actually learn some best practices, some really great strategies from some super smart CIOs, Ed and John, and Eric is going to provide some great insights from enterprise architecture at a national level. And we're going to learn some investment governance methods that are really going to, I think, maybe reshape the way you think about your environments. So that is a backdrop. We've conducted this NASCIO VMware modernization survey. So let's go to the next slide. This question in the survey, we asked the state CIOs, what are the top 5 drivers that are really driving your modern application methods? And I like this slide because it really talks about 2 things: technical, old risky code, technical debt, cybersecurity risk, as well as the business side. Does not meet business demand, and agencies prioritize it for an important thing like citizen service. So Ed and John, I'm going to start with Ed first. Does this actually reflect what you heard from your business community and your business leaders?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. In fact, I would say every one of those apply to our modernization effort. In fact, multiple of those things are the reasons why we modernized here.
Yeah, in a little bit, you're going to talk about your application portfolio, both looking at it from 2 different lenses, one from the business side, what you hear from business leaders, and one from the technical side. So that's great to hear. John, what about you? How did you drive your modernization strategy, and are these drivers applicable?
Yeah, they're absolutely applicable. I think it's a partnership between our centralized IT agency, we're the centralized IT agency for the executive branch, and our sister agencies across state government to not only look at has the business need changed, but is the delivery of service changed? Are we doing things differently? Is there opportunity for improvement, better citizen experience? as well as, is there an opportunity to do more with less? We're asked to do more with less every day, right? Whether it's money or people, skills gaps. So we're constantly looking at those opportunities to adjust. So every one of these things on here, touches how we look at our application portfolios.
Very good. Eric, I'm going to ask you from your side of it, the correlation of the number of answers along here. Is one more important than another, or how do you view these?
Well, one thing I want to mention as well, Herb, that what we chose to show here on this slide are the top 6. And in fact, the survey that we had presented to our state CIOs had something like 12 different potential drivers, and they got very high scores. But these are the top ones, and I think this is very consistent with what we hear from across the states. Certainly, changing business needs. Some of the systems, sort of goes with the 2 bar charts: older, risky code, but also older code that no longer meets new business needs. And as you stated, Herb, now we're getting more into a digital environment, citizen experience, creating personas. So the systems that are digitized are providing services from the citizen's perspective. Like, what are they trying to do? And we don't want them to have to know how state government is organized.
Excellent point, Eric. This personalized, no wrong door approach across citizen service is really fundamental to the way we change things. So very good. Let's flip to the next slide and see what we have here. There's always headwinds and friction to anything we do, and this reflects, as Eric had pointed out, the top answers. And I think we had maybe 20 different answers, but these are the ones that had 10 or more survey responses. Funding was important, dedicated staff time. And so what we heard is it's not just dedicated IT staff time, but it is dedicated staff time from our business areas, the subject matter experts. I'm going to jump over number 3 and talk about number 4 and 5 really quick. When we don't want to repave the cow path, right, we have to do significant business redesign, and the agency resistant to change are 2 of them. I'm going to quote some of the Dakota boys, Pat Snow and Dwayne Sheila in North Dakota, North and South Dakota. They argue which one is the better Dakota, by the way, but they both said, how do you get the business to think digitally? How do you get them to understand what is the art of the possible rather than doing the same thing over and over? So Ed and John, I want your reaction to number 4 and 5. How have you worked with a business to actually have them do process re-engineering, do automated process, to really think about the business differently from a digital lens? Ed, why don't you hit it?
Yeah, in fact, those are the 2 that I zero in on right there. Business process redesign and then resistance to change. And I think they're the same thing, because so often, even when they want to modernize, they want the same exact processes, right? They don't want to change the processes to fit the tool. And of course, then you end up with, and everyone's been through this, and I've been through this in my past, and I don't want to repeat it. And that's customized apps, right? So where you just cause number 8, technical know-how and technical debt, right? So in Nebraska, we actually have what's called the Center of Excellence, and it's a group of green belts, black belts that go into the agency. And before I start a project, the very first thing I have them do is map the process as it currently is. And then with their help, we go over how it could be improved, how we could take out those non-value added steps, all those things that we need to do. And sometimes we actually come away without, with just very small tweaks to their process versus actually, rip and replace an application. Or we go in and to get what they need, we just have to modify their current process or their current process and application. And that's actually, the easiest outcome. But resistance to change, they've done it the same way for 20 years and they don't want to change it, right? And so you really have to get that third party in there. It's good to have that process improvement team that's, totally independent, and they come in and help to redo and revamp those processes. But yeah, we won't even start a project without getting a readout from that group.
Well, being a Green Six Sigma belt, that's music to my ears. That value stream mapping is so important. How about you, John? What about,
Yeah,
how did you focus on that?
I think Ed's right. 4 and 5 are married together all day long. Like IT, like every sector right now, there's, a shortage of workers. And it's hard to do some of those things sometimes. And that's why, resistance often shows up when you start talking about business process redesign. It's usually, I just don't have enough people. I need to do something now. And, we found ways to assist with that with internal resources sometimes. Governor Scott, in his first year in office, put forward a program called Pivot. I'm not going to remember the acronym in the moment, but really it was to focus on training our state staff in lean, making sure that, no matter where you worked, lean training was available. So we could look for those things, not only just as a project was starting off, but in our everyday work. So continually looking to lean things out. And from our perspective, in the IT world, we don't always see things as lean as we'd like them, or as standardized. So we've tried to help by being a good partner, understanding their needs, understanding not only timeline, but what it means to the citizens for the project to go forward. So a lot of things are considered when we prioritize, but ideally we always like to look at the process redesign and get as far down that road as possible to ensure that not only that we're implementing not for just today but for the future, but we're giving citizens the experience they deserve.
That's a great answer. Now I'm going to turn to number 3, this big dinosaur, large legacy systems, and we all have them: unemployment insurance, integrated eligibility, large DMV, large offender systems. They have been built, rebuilt, bolted on, added to. I think in Wisconsin, we finally did our integrated eligibility system design. It turned out to be 70 subsystems comprised of 5 different platforms. So how do you take these large legacy systems that have been built on, added on to forever, they function as a one unit? How do you start breaking them down to modernize them incrementally so you get some value, but it's not like having to change the wheels on the bus while it's going down the road? How have you approached these large legacy systems, which has been a drawback?
Yeah, so it's funny you mentioned those projects specifically, because those are all on our list. Whether it be integrated eligibility, UI, DMV modernization, and ERP, all 4 of those currently are funded with modernization funds right now. And each one has a slightly different approach, but standardization has been really key to how we drive these things forward. Get out of the mindset of I need the button to be red, I need the button to be blue, and really start to look at things more from a capabilities tier and an ecosystem of what you have to not only give them the service they need, but look at our application portfolio as a whole and figure out what do we have, what can meet the need, and how do we move forward. So when we look at something like integrated eligibility, the rules engine may be on one platform, and the front end's going to be on a different platform, but together they fit within our capability tiers here in the state to give us a holistic solution that We know how to manage the softwares. We know how to manage the platforms without learning new things on the outside on different capabilities and growing our portfolio. So through that process, we've been able to look at the different technologies that we have. And I won't name any specific companies, but we have an ecosystem out there that we like to work within to ensure that we have a skilled, deep bench to be able to support these things long term.
John, that's an excellent point. You talked about functions, a rules engine. You also have like a citizen experience
That's right.
portal and platform. So you have these platforms and you kind of link these platforms to kind of replace old legacy environments. Ed, what are you doing in Nebraska that kind of is breaking apart, componentizing these things?
Yeah, we are in the middle of our last of those four. Our ERP system we replaced in 19, our DMV system and our unemployment system we replaced in 20. So right now, really that fourth one that you mentioned, the eligibility, is the one we've been working on. And we are actually slowly modernizing. The others, we literally, the ERP, we just upgraded. The DMV and unemployment, we literally ripped and replaced. And then the last one, which is I think the toughest one for all the states, I think everybody is having trouble with Medicaid eligibility. That's the big elephant out there that you have to just kind of take one bite at a time. And so what we've done is it's called iServe. You can go out and it's got an incredibly nice front end. It's, web and iPhone, and, you can use your phones, you can use whatever to put in your data. It's a very, very slick little front end. And what it does is it literally feeds a legacy system on the back end. And what we're doing is, as we're gathering the information, then we're taking that information and inserting it into the legacy system 3 weeks at a time, right? So we take certain fields, certain workflows, every 3 weeks, we do a release, agile processing, and, the agile process. And we're just, we think we've got about a 3-year plan. But the great thing is, we don't fail large. We're only moving a few fields at a time. A good example is last week, they ran into a problem because it is web-based. They ran into a problem. We're just going to put it into the next release, right? So it's a very slow, incremental process that we're going to see results. We're already starting to hear the caseworkers say, yeah, we're definitely going in the right direction. And the hardest thing I think about, especially the eligibility system, is the population that you're dealing with. They really can't give good requirements. So the agile approach is the only way to do it. So it's like, okay, this is what you're going to get. Is that what you wanted? Yes. And then as soon as they get it, they can instantly start using that because it's automatically feeding the information into the legacy system where they were manually inputting that information before. So now it's automating their workload, and we can never hire enough, right? So we never have enough people to actually do that. So we're taking manual work away from them, and every 3 weeks they're seeing, wait a minute, I don't have to do that anymore. I don't have to do that. And so we're getting a lot of positive feedback on the approach. And then when we do run into a hiccup, like we did, just ended up being a minor issue, but it's like, okay, well, we'll just put it into the next release. Not a problem, right? Because none of the customers see it, right? And even our internal caseworkers, they know what's coming, but they were fine. Okay, well, I'll get it 3 weeks from now instead of today, right? So I think the only way you can modernize a system like that, especially when your audience just really cannot give you good requirements up front, is agile. You've just got to go at it very small, and that way you fail small and you win small, and it just gradually builds. We did that with the online application. They're totally happy with it.
Mm.
And now they're very pleased with the way we're inserting it into the legacy app. And the legacy app itself, you know, people say, well, will it go away? No, it's not. We're just modernizing it. One release at a time. It's becoming more and more modernized.
Yeah, I think DevOps is a great way to go. And one of the things that we've really tried to do, because we've seen so much turnover, whether it be on the IT side with employees or on the business side with employees, and new ideas constantly coming in, we've tried to get ahead of the game a little bit and plan out what those technology capability tiers look like as part of our rationalization of what we're going to use and what our ecosystem looks like. So we've picked a vendor for ID services, right? We have an application integration platform that we plan to use. Our public facing applications are going to be built out of, one of 3 different platforms. And so we can standardize and start to focus and give predictability to the agencies out there, because there's a long CMS process that you got to go through, all the hoops you got to jump through, all the paperwork to be able to lay out a sound methodology for how we're going to move forward and how it's going to not only help the eligibility piece, but as we expand, as state government expands services, to make sure that, we have an enterprise approach to all those things.
John and Ed, it sounds like you're following the MIDA guidance right down to a T, the small, incremental, componentized, and great insight, Ed. A lot of times our customers can't express what they want, but they can express what they don't like after they see it. So I think that was excellent. Eric, I'm going to call upon you. Talk about your enterprise architecture and what you're hearing as far as modernization in this challenge.
Good points from Ed and John. And I guess some things that we have learned, you mentioned the COVID events and all of that came with all that. But we found that, for instance, there are cases where a background legacy system could handle the volume, but a GUI interface between citizen and legacy could not. So we've learned whatever entry points you're creating to, in fact, enhance that customer experience when it's relying on a legacy system that might be probably still on a mainframe, that how powerful mainframes are. Okay, that can handle it, but your entry point has got to also be able to handle the throughput. The other thing that it kind of comes into play here when we talk about enterprise architecture, we've learned, don't say that word. Don't say you're doing enterprise architecture. You get people all upset, and they call you a theoretical whatever, so don't tell them what you're doing. But in fact, you still have to do this. And the reason being, we're talking about precise business rules, and we're talking about business rules. We got to be sure, and the investment our citizens are making in these systems, we got to be sure we're making the right design decisions. And that gets into number 5. As well as number 2, we have got to have involvement of the people that are actually going to use the system. And I'm wondering if we should even call them customers, because we're in a realm here where, in fact, we're all state employees. We're all trying to deliver services to citizens, whether you're working in data management, cloud services, public health, it doesn't matter. So all of that thinking has to be, we're in this together. The agile approach being brought up by Ed and John, that engages everybody. So they're part of it, and they have to have that in their job description. It can't be skunk work. It can't be volunteer work. It's got to be dedicated time that's devoted to that project. And something else you mentioned, Dwayne Shell up in North Dakota, significant business process redesign. That's very important. I know Dwayne goes through that before he will engage or redesign using capabilities like robotic process automation. We have to also look for those hidden factories. Our state employees are smart, and they make stuff work even when it doesn't work. And what they do is they uncover these hidden factories hey, George, hey, Julie, how do you do this? Well, let me show you how you make that work. So as part of that redesign, we have to uncover those hidden factories. How does it really work? And that's a great opportunity to make these improvements and truly engage our state employees in making a better solution.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right, Eric. They're not, and I have this debate from time to time with other secretaries. They're not necessarily my customer, they're my partner, right? And every now and again they're like, but I'm your customer. And I'm like, you're right, but you're my partner as well. This has to work for all of us. This has to work for the enterprise. The part that we need, in my opinion, we need to change, and not just in Vermont, is our way of thinking about, how we pick our products, how we pick our solutions and platforms going forward, because we can't be everything to everyone. Everyone can't be a snowflake, because we'll never get our IT costs under control. We'll never get our inventories or application portfolios under control. And we'll always have a majority or a large portion that is considered technical debt.
Well, gentlemen, that takes us right to the next slide. So if we could advance that. This one really talks to our question on what percentage of your portfolio actually is in need of modernization. You can see the big 50%, 10, 7, and 3. Really, like half of the states actually responded that over 50% of their portfolio needs modernization. Now, doing some rough math, that's between 12 and 18,000 applications. That's a lot. So how have we skinnied down our big portfolios and really started looking at less case management, less licensing systems? So John, can you talk to us about how you reduced the volume of your portfolio by like 300 apps by doing a rationalization?
Absolutely. I have an excellent team.
That's one answer.
Right. They make me look good. I think a lot of it comes down to getting back to your ecosystem, getting back to vetting the technologies out there and standardization and looking across the enterprise. Vermont had 230-ish, things that did case management. Why? Because everyone wanted something that was their own, right? And this administration, we've been very focused on, we call it the 80% rule, but it's more like 90%. We try to meet 90% of the requirements and have them tag along or consolidate and use a preferred platform or a existing solution that's already out there to help us reduce the overall number. 1,500 applications for a small state of Vermont. It was one application for every 6.5 people, every 6.5 workers, excuse me. It just was unmanageable for us. And so that's really how we've done it. We looked at what we had, we looked at our capabilities, and we started laying out those things, ID services, integration layer, forward facing, what are we doing for monitoring? What are we doing for analytics? And picking the best of breed tools out there to ensure that we didn't have 6 different analytics tools, one for each agency. We were standardizing and really taking more of an enterprise approach.
That's excellent. So you're not replacing a line of code with a new line of code. You are collapsing, rationalizing, settling on a platform. So where you can. Can you talk to us right before we get to Ed about your application portfolio analysis? And you've talked to us before about your 5-year plan for every application. Talk to us a little bit about what that means. So give some insight.
Yeah, so this is a maturity thing, right? We're a new agency. I call us a new agency. We're 5.5 years old, almost 6, I guess. And each year we do a little bit more and try to understand a little bit better what we have and what the path forward is. I've talked about capabilities. I've talked about, our ecosystem. It started with what's our inventory look like? What do we have, right? It's really interesting to me when you look at the survey to hear that there's a huge portion of states or state respondents, I think 40%, that said that they don't have a good inventory, a detailed inventory of what they have. It's really hard to move the ball if you don't understand what's in your environment. Every state's a little different. It has its own struggles, but we started there, right? You know, understanding what we have. Our IT leads, we have a IT lead for each major agency. They've been assigned, this is the second year where they take what's in their inventory and they, you know, list out the cost, what the projected costs are going forward, and what's the plan for that application at the end of the contract. Is it an RFP for, you know, another solution just like it? Does it fit into something we have? You know, what is that path forward? And it's been a really good process for the state of Vermont to go through. And I think that's something, you know, we strive for is, you know, a mature model around those 5-year plans to know whether it's, you know, widget X in the agency of transportation. We know that in 2 years, we don't have a capability for that, and then we're going to go out to RFP, and that's going to be the path in 2 years. So our procurement folks can line it up. Our business office, specifically around funding, can work with the agencies, and the IT leads can work with our business partners to ensure that we're all on the same page as far as what the life of that product and what the next product will look like.
John, that's excellent. We're going to talk about investment and governance in a second, but Ed, talk to us about your methodology, your portfolio analysis, where you look at it from the business side, you look at it from the technical, you look at it from the criticality and disaster recovery, all those aspects into your portfolio management. Talk to us about how you've done that.
Yeah, and I think, you know, the more I think about it, it actually happened in 2 phases, right? So the very first thing was consolidation. And so when we consolidated, the agencies were about 90% of their servers, and we moved over 6,000 square feet of data closets, I'll call them, across the state. And we moved them into our 2 data centers. And when we did move them, we made a cognizant effort of changing them from physical to virtual. Big cost savings, big footprint savings, right? Because I didn't want to fill up our 2 data centers, and so it was a really strategic thing. And I made the analogy when we were doing that, you have to look at everything that's on that server in order to virtualize it and move it to our server. Everything was old, so we literally probably 90% of the servers we trashed, we refurbished. I mean, we just salvaged them. And the analogy I'd use is my dad. I grew up military, and my dad had a weight limit, and every time we got reassigned, he gave me a box and said, "Okay, only keep the things that are really important to you." And so every couple of years, I had to clean out everything I had because my dad wasn't going to pay the weight limit, right? If he was over the limit on our moving. That's exactly what the agencies did. They didn't want to move something and then pay me, even though it was a much lower cost at a virtualized price. So they did the first cleanup. But then when they did that cleanup, they gave us the keys to the castle. We knew exactly what they had, exactly where it was, and we kept track of that. So then that was phase 1. They did their own housekeeping, right? They cleaned up. It was amazing how many people said, "Oh, I didn't even know the application was still running. We replaced it 5 years ago," right? And we're like, "Okay, well, we're not going to move it then. You know, we're just going to kill it off." Well, that was phase 1. And then phase 2, we decided to get very, very structured, and we got Gartner's time model. And we had the information, and we just roughly put everything into the time, the quadrant there, where you had tolerate in the upper left, you had invest in the upper right, you had migrate in the lower right, and then in the lower left you had eliminate. Of course, we were looking for eliminate. And what we did was, if we saw any duplicate applications, we would put it into the eliminate, because we in Nebraska, our saying is we only have one of anything. That's it. That's the max. And so we made the first pass, but then we had a person dedicated to going to every agency and saying, "We know what's in our data center. We know it because we bill you for it. We know what's on these servers. This is our first pass. Now, will you take a look and put them in how you would rate these. Is it tolerate? Is it invest? Is it migrate? Is it eliminate? And we had a training program to show them what it was, what it meant, what we're looking for. And it was surprising. They made very few changes, but the big surprise that we found was, it had, number of customers, things like that. And the changes that they made was they knew much more about what was critical. And in Nebraska, we require, if it's a critical app, if you deemed it a critical app, then you must have 2 instances running, one in each data center, so that we have full redundancy and failover capabilities. And there were a lot of critical apps that they identified that we had to replicate into our Omaha data center, because it was either in our Lincoln data center and that was it, or it was in our Omaha data center and that was it. And so we probably got more business by doing this than we lost business, because there was a lot of them that said, no, I want 2 of these, right? Okay, well, that means it's critical, yep. And then we walked through what that meant and everything. And we got rid of probably equal amount of eliminate, because again, it was things that, well, we don't need that because we use this other app. I don't even know why we have it in your data center. And so it was that 2-prong approach, and it took us a good 2 years to ferret it out. And then every agency got about a 20-page readout of everything that they owned. And it's amazing, because we only really required cabinet or code agencies to follow that, but then our non-code agencies heard about it and they wanted the same thing, because they saw a chance to reduce cost also by, cleaning out unnecessary or unneeded applications. And so it was that 2-step process. They did the first housekeeping when we consolidated, and now they're doing, that much deeper dive into analyzing what they really need, what do they need as far as availability standards, things like that. So yeah, it kind of grew, and it grew organically. It was amazing. I kind of thought we might get pushback, but instead we got the opposite. The cabinet agencies were great. The non-cabinet agencies wondered why they weren't involved. And so we ended up and that's where the project really got extended, because the non-cabinet agencies wanted to take part in it also.
So you not only described a great partnership that you built because of this, but great transparency for the business units to understand what they're paying for and why it's so critical to their business.
Right.
Let's move forward to actually look at, can I move the next slide? Here's a question. Now we talk about governance. The chart on the left, who controls the budget? It's not surprising. It looks like a mix, or individual agencies basically own the dollars to invest in migration and modernization. But on the right-hand side, we really talk about the governance process over our application portfolio. And, John, I know you're one of the 33% up there that got a capital investment. Talk to us about how you used governance to actually get the 60+ million to invest in your 12 major projects that you've got going.
Yeah, I think it goes back to what I was talking about a couple of minutes ago around the maturity, at least for us. Each year, we've added on a little bit more and done a little bit more, proved ourselves a little bit more, stayed transparent with the legislature. My job during the winter is primarily, I don't want to say primarily, but a big part of it is legislative, keeping those relationships, building those relationships, being truthful about the scope of our challenges, and being transparent about all the things going on in ADS. So I'm constantly over there talking about what we're doing, what we'd like to do, what our priorities are in the agency, and how they align with the governor's priorities, how the projects that we've picked align with not only the agency priorities, ADS priorities, but also the governor's priorities and legislative priorities. So being able to lay out where they fit in the strategy, along with our vetting process of each agency submits a list of IT projects. It then gets looked at, and these are for modernization dollars, not outside of the normal budget process. We then, bring it to the cabinet. The cabinet secretary in charge of the project or that has the business need for the project talks about it in front of the rest of the cabinet.
Wow.
We go through that exercise, and then the governor, myself, usually a staff liaison, and the finance chief will meet and talk about, which ones align best, which ones offer, the most increased security, the best citizen experience, which one have the, possibilities of really driving change and how the agency can do business going forward. So there's a lot that's considered there. At that point, we collect the dollar amount needed and work with the chief financial officer of the state to start to put a package around it. We then bring that package to the legislature and walk through how we came up with those as priorities and how they were weighed and what the value of each one of those looks like.
So you align the executive agency leadership, you align the governor's office leadership, and the legislatures. Oh, that's great message, great lesson learned. Ed, let's hear from you. Talked about the portfolio management. How does that relate then to actually getting dollars?
Okay. Yeah, Nebraska, as people would imagine, we don't give dollars away very easily. You have to go through a pretty stiff process. There is an overall governance board for technology in Nebraska, and it's called the Nebraska Information Technology Commission. It's nitc.nebraska.gov. And historically, that's always been chaired by the lieutenant governor. When I got here, I now chair that. I've been chairing it for the last 8 years. And then it has advisory groups. So the Nebraska Information Technology Commission is the one that has at the very end, the overall approval to move a modernization project forward. Now, they can just make recommendations, right? We didn't get elected. We're not legislators, so we can't appropriate any money. But in order to get to the NITC to get your project approved, you have to go through an advisory board. And we just went through that the last few weeks. The advisory board is called the Tech Panel. And the Tech Panel, I sit on the Tech Panel. I used to chair the Tech Panel. It was a little bit of a conflict of interest. And so I took myself out of the chair position of that one. And what the Tech Panel does is it's responsible for reviewing all the technology budget related requests. It monitors projects once they're approved, and it reviews all grant applications and recommendations for any type of technical standards. So last week we went through a gauntlet of 4 or 5 of the agencies, and that's code agencies and non-code agencies. So every agency in the state has to go through this. The only people who are exempt are the people who actually set it up, which is the legislature. They somehow exempted themselves from the process. But everyone else has to show up, and they do a verbal interview with the panel, and they have to then provide written business plans. And we used to, when I got here, it was, can it be done? And I changed that to, should it be done, right? Because anything can be done. And they write that up, and then this technical panel scores those projects, and the ones that get high scores, they get recommended at the NITC. The NITC then reviews them again, and the same agencies have to go through the gauntlet there, and then it's sent over to the legislature for review. Now, the great thing about that is the Tech Panel is not government employees. If you look at the website and you look at the commission, it's not government employees. It is a mixture. In fact, we have on the membership, we have more non-government employees in our membership than government employees. So senior advisor to the university, Hamilton Communications, Precision Technologies, Phillips Community County Commissioner, Strategic, U.S. Strategic Command, Bennington School District, Greco Farms. You notice I haven't named a single government person, me and a legislator. That's it. So the IT budget is controlled. These projects are controlled by the citizens of Nebraska, not me. So when they approve something, they've had that ability to totally vet everything they're about to pay taxes for. So when it's a $20 million project, then, you know, there's the list of the people right there that approve these projects, right? And, you know, I get someone to look at me and go, we just approved, you know, a $20 million project, and I said, yeah, you know, it's better that it's done by the public in Nebraska, not by employees. Like I said, when I read the list, there's not a single person except me that's a public employee, unless you want to count Senator Geist. She's the only other one. I think it's wonderful because it is truly the state business run by citizens of Nebraska.
That's a great story. In due to time, I'm just going to move through the next slide. Okay, guys. We talked about portfolio. We talked about governance. This is how we're actually getting things done. 35. It's the number represents the number of states who responded. We had 42 responses. So agile. Again, John and Ed, you talked about that in detail. Low code. You know, John, and both you and John and Ed have used low code in order to get things, vaccinations, scheduling, PPE done. Then let's move into this replatforming, API integration. John, real quickly, from your standpoint, you know, you talked about an API framework to replatform things. Talk to us a little bit about how you're utilizing that platform.
Yeah, you know, we're still fairly young in that area. You know, we've picked our tool, we've started using in some agencies, but there's still a lot left out there. And we've been taking more on as projects come forward, right? You know, I think our ERP system has, you know, a couple hundred API connections, all built differently, all different kinds of tools. You can imagine the mess there is to keep all those straight and understand each one of those. So having a enterprise application integration layer is, you know, going to be critical to how we perform going forward with the way, you know, all of our systems interact, whether it be, you know, our low code environment to our databases to our, you know, Microsoft platforms. No matter what it is, you know, I think the integration layer is going to be super important to making sure that we can connect our applications and our data.
Excellent point. Ed, from your standpoint, any comment on these?
We're right in the middle of everything on that list. You know, because the application that we're modernizing now, the Medicaid, the application sits in the cloud, but the processing of the logic sits on-prem. So, you know, we make those connections obviously through the APIs, and we use every one of those Kubernetes in the cloud. Everything you've got there, we utilize. And the APIs are really what's allowing us to modernize and still keep around some that legacy system that is supported well and it performs well. It just didn't have the front end that we wanted. So once we got the front end, then of course we had to make sure that it connected to our legacy platform seamlessly. And so we're having to use everything you got there, except we haven't had to re-platform anything. So we're in good shape there.
I just think I'm just going to make a quick point. If we ask how many people are doing Kubernetes 2 years ago, that I don't know where that number was, but it was very low. Now we've got 15 16 people talking about Kubernetes, which represents about 35% of the states moving into this new modern application environments. I think that's pretty cool. Well, we've got a couple slides to get to before we close it out, so I'm just going to go ahead. And that's one is staffing. Staffing so critical. John, Ed, talk to us about how you're bringing staff in, how you're upskilling them, keeping them current. Ed?
Yeah, we've got a great relationship. We've had it for about 7 years now with the community colleges. We find that's the niche. That's the place that we can find our talent, is at the community college. We're only a couple of blocks away from 4-year, the University of Nebraska. We help them if they're interested to obtain their 4-year degree, and we help pay for that. So there's a big draw when they can come to us, get a pretty good salary, and if they want to, we're pretty liberal about them just walking up the street, take a class, come back to work. And so that's a big draw for them. And we have, I did not realize it, but we have over a third of our employees. We have 350, over a third of them came from the community colleges.
Wow. John, how about you?
Yeah, unfortunately, we don't have a real big college to draw from here in Vermont. We do rely on local colleges around, including Norwich University, one of the oldest private military schools that really excels in cyber. And they've been a good pipeline for us for not only personnel, but helping us with our skills gap, helping us with some of the daily challenges that we have, and to augment when needed security related work. So that's one of the things that I'm probably most excited about over the past couple of years, is that pipeline there. But we spend a lot of time at job fairs, specifically college job fairs, and investing in training for our own employees, and trying to create an environment that gives people the ability to not only work on the old stuff, but see new technologies. When you think about it, state government, whether it be Vermont, California, Nebraska, we have some significant challenges. And where else could you get the kind of not only localized technical expertise, but enterprise expertise all in one? State government offers it all. And we really try to sell that when we talk to new recruits.
So it's not just job posting, but it is recruiting for positions. So
right. Real recruiting too, right? Not just posting it on your LinkedIn page,
right.
Almost headhunting at some level.
And I think one of the things that we kind of do that's very untraditional or non-traditional is we hire the people not for a particular position. We just bring them in, and then we find the right fit for that individual. So they'll have an associate's degree in IT, and we'll hire them, and we bring them in what's called SOS, which is like an intern, but they get paid a full salary and they get benefits. And they have 6 months to figure out who they want to be when they grow up. And if they do, and they do a good job, we give them a full-time official job where they get benefits, where they get retirement and everything else. And if not, then they get washed out of the program. And so we do have like an IT academy, because we do say, we train them. We actually have a training academy for COBOL. And if they do well, then great, we'll hire you. If not, then the end of the SOS is a temporary position that they have about 6 months to figure out whether or not they want to stay with the state or move on. And there's a very high success rate. The vast majority remain in in our agency, and they may not stay where we initially hired them. They find their niche, and then we hire them. But they know they've got to find a niche within that 6 months if they want to stay with us.
Great. Next, let's hit the next slide, because you both talked about this idea of relationship management. It's important to build partnership with executive agency leadership, the governor's office, legislature. Talk to us about your relationship management components. So John, I'm going to start with you. Customer engagement, marketing your services, executive alignment.
Yeah, I think there's one other that you missed, and that's strategic partnerships with our vendors, right? And how important that can be to the overall success of not only the IT agencies, but to state government in general, and making sure that those relationships are have the proper care and feeding. And that's one piece that I think often goes overlooked is those relationships. For us in our organizational structure, when we created the agency, we were very mindful, because they had been through a couple consolidations and evolution of how and what they were going to offer for services. We kept everyone sitting where they were sitting when we were centralized. We wanted the business users and the IT application developers and techs to sit together. We wanted them sitting, side by side, to learn from each other, to ensure that everyone had, proper IT representation. The IT leads for each agency, which were really the directors or CIOs, depending on the agencies, just got rerouted and report to my office now. And through that process, we were able to establish those IT leads into each one of the agency senior leadership teams. So our human services IT lead is part of the human services senior leadership team, meets with the secretary, the deputy secretary, and builds those relationships outside of the CIO's office to ensure that our IT leads are representing them when they come back to the centralized agency. As we talk about, what we're doing enterprise-wide, they can represent those views to ensure that we're taking all things into consideration and everyone's represented well. I think that's really important. On the customer front, one of the things that we've been trying to do more and more, and we're not great at it. The agencies are getting better, but really reaching out to our constituents and telling them what we're doing, showing them what we're building. A recent example that went wrong but was a good learning lesson was we built an application that was going to send checks to childcare providers. The system got about 90% done, and they finally decided to engage the stakeholder group. And at that point, the stakeholder group lit up the application and told them all the things that they wished it had. And through those lessons learned, the application didn't go live, and it went back to be reworked to fit all those things in. So it was a tough lesson for our business partners to learn, and for us to learn as well. But we're going to be stronger for it, because it's something that we can talk about and talk about the value of those things as we move forward.
Good. Ed, can you comment about BRM right before we wrap this?
Yeah, we have BSM, so business service managers are in each agency. They're part of our org. Development for enterprise apps is done by our org. Mission critical, agency specific applications developers stay in the agency. Obviously, their business customers are there, so they agency specific or mission critical. The DMVs, their application developers are at DMV. Same thing with HHS. No infrastructure is anywhere except in the office of the CIO. They really don't care. It's like electricity. As long as that server's on, they don't care. They don't care where you're sitting, as long as every day they come in and your application turns on, right? So all that network, all that infrastructure is all maintained within the office of the CIO. And in fact, they're not allowed to be in any agency.
Good. Well, let's take the next slide, which is kind of a wrap-up slide of 4 recommendations. Enterprise portfolio we talked about, governance we talked about, staffing, and relationship management. Ed, can you give us a few words into closing about this importance?
Yeah, I mean, you definitely, governance and data. I mean, data is the key to everything. I think you gotta make sure that you survey your customers, make sure that you provide transparency to your customers. We have open houses on a regular basis. We explain our rates in detail, agonies in detail on how we come up with it, so that no one knows, no one is confused about how we've calculated what we've calculated. Our financial staff gets with every single agency's financial staff and goes over their numbers. And we open our books to them. And I think that transparency builds that relationship. And, you know, and the application portfolio management, things like that, those are just, they see those as value add things that we bring to them.
Good. John, any closing words right before you after we depart?
Yeah, I think, you know, being able to articulate the value to your partners across state government, to the legislature, to the cabinet, you know, for those agencies or for those IT organizations that aren't centralized, one of the biggest things I always see is, you know, master contracts. Leverage your buying power. Some of these states are very, very big, and you can certainly show value very easily with some simple steps like that. And that goes to, you know, the relationships you build in your organization, and how you look at your portfolio and where the opportunities are.
Ed, John, thank you so much. We're at the top of the hour. Thank you. Eric, I'm going to turn it over to you. Thanks for being part of the panel as well.
Absolutely. And want to let everyone know we have a report that is in process. It's coming out soon. Greg, I see your question. We're going to get back to you offline on that. But I also want to thank Ed and John and Herb for being on this webinar, and all of you for attending. This is recorded. It will be posted soon. Thank you all very much.
Thank you all.